when the child is finishing their time on the swing in order to give the next child a turn, or finishing their time with the toy in order for the other kid to have an experience with the toy, it's a loss to the kid.
Yeah.
Because developmentally, that's all it is. It's
Right.
just a loss.
That
And so
thing's
then
gone
you
now.
tend to the loss versus treating it like a lesson in sharing, which they're just not there yet. Later, it can be a lesson in sharing. It could be a seed towards the plant of sharing.
Absolutely.
But in this stage, it's just now they're a new person. They're newly having an experience with something. And now you as an adult, you are preferring other adults and children. And that's also probably healthy and good.
Totally
but it's
fine.
just how to relate to the kid in the process.
Yes.
Right.
And what I'm like really advocating against is acting like it's their moral failing for being upset when their turn is over.
Sure.
This kid is bad at sharing. This kid doesn't care about other people.
Right.
Because they didn't want to give a thing up. Like,
right.
that is reasonable.
Sure.
To a child who has lost something that they're not done with, it feels like an injustice. And there are feelings about that. And they are not a bad kid or a bad friend or a bad community member when they're 1 and 2 and early 3 in that circumstance. Like, they're not the one who is lacking some kind of important social and moral value.
Sweet Wilson James, my 4-year-old son, broke his arm last night on the monkey bars, like falling off the monkey bars. And we think it's funny that Sean takes these kids to the park every day. They do the scariest stuff. I watch videos of stuff they do, and I'm like, oh, no. If I were there, this would not have happened. And surely I take them to the playground, and it is the time that I am with them at the park that he falls and breaks his arm.
Yeah.
But I will say that kids breaking bones has been one of my huge fears, like just secret fears. I haven't talked about it because I've just been afraid to bring it up. So as it was happening, I was thinking like, whoa, look, I'm living through this.
Yeah.
Whoa, this is crazy. It's happening. And I think I just imagine when a kid breaks their bone, they just cry nonstop from beginning to cast. And I thought like, wow, that's many hours of crying. But he cried a lot, and then calmed down when we went to the ER because it was interesting and they were treating him so good, thankfully. And then, obviously he would cry like crazy anytime they moved his arm, which was too bad. And then he was very attached to the clothes he was wearing, which I didn't realize.
Sure.
He was wearing 3 shirts, which also didn't plan for a broken arm in any way. And so I'm like, baby, I think we have to cut off your shirts because he couldn't move his arm. And he was like, oh, no, this is my Hot Wheels shirt. Like, we're not cutting this.
Yeah.
So then he just let me slow and steady remove everything. So that felt like a success that he was shirtless, but no shirts were cut in the process. And
sure, he was in pain, but he was not in enough pain that he was in little enough pain that he could still be negotiating with you about the clothes. That's like still a very sad range of pain, but not that like.
But still, his mind was there. And he was very he was pretty peeved that we didn't take him by ambulance to the hospital, and he just kept bringing it up. And he's like, I wish I was a grown-up so I could call myself an ambulance so I could ride in it to the hospital. It's like, I know. And then I said, if it was a worse injury, like we probably would have called 911, but it wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I wish it was worse. I'm like, sorry. I'm happy it's not worse.
Yeah,
so anyway, but today
I'm happy you didn't spend $900 on an ambulance.
Thank
That's
you.
like a really
People
just
not
an expensive, fun experience for him.
People not in America probably don't understand that that's how that works. But you pay a lot of money.
Much money if you have to call an ambulance.
Yes.
Which is
so a lot of people don't do it. They Uber instead of ambulance if it's it's possible.
We put ourselves in very dangerous circumstances because our healthcare system is so ruined.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very sad.
But he got a temporary cast, and he's going to the Children's Hospital today to get the real one. They tried to x-ray him, but he was crying so much and he was so swollen. And I don't think we could see anything. And so they said, let's just temporary cast it.
Yeah.
And then figure it out. So that was last night.
That makes sense.
The
I broke my
adventure.
elbow once, and having to straighten it for the x-ray is literally the most painful thing that's ever happened in my whole life.
Okay.
I haven't had any babies, as we all know.
Okay.
But that's the worst so far for me.
I've heard it's horrible.
It was
and if it's broken really bad, you could get surgery. Did you need surgery?
No, it was broken.
Okay.
It even was broken only a little.
Oh,
but it was
that's
like
good,
once
but
he
it's
got the
horrible.
x-ray up, the doctor was like, oh, that hurts. And that made me feel way better.
That's
I was like,
good. Yeah. Yeah, he was sobbing. And the x-ray tech was so nice and was like, I think we're going to pass. Clearly something's not right here, and we can just hold it in place till we can figure it out. Okay. But they said that in a few days it might even be more obvious where the break is.
Sure.
I don't know. But
maybe
anyway,
things will be less puffy.
Yes, that's the idea.
Okay.
So that was our last night. Oh. How's your week been, Miss Layne? Oh, actually, let's welcome them. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our podcast. My name is Jessica Hover.
I'm Layne Sherland, and this is Very Good Enough, a podcast from Very Good Mothers Club. I've had a big week.
Yeah, Layne is famous now.
Can you even believe everyone? I'm keeping like no pictures. Everybody back down. I'm deeply unfamous. I remain.
You
profoundly unfamous.
No, I've been checking. I'm like such a fangirl. I've been checking like the increase in followers as it's been going because you've been working very hard. We've been for this.
And very little has happened in a long span.
Until now.
It's been a real journey to try and figure out like what this Instagram account that's attached to my business is even for. What do people want? What do we do? And my business has changed and I've gotten tired and there's been so much and like
I've gotten tired.
It's so
the
small.
most relatable line. All of us are like, same, go on.
Yeah, it's been such a little tiny account. It's still a pretty small account, but
it like doubled. Did it
more
more
than
than doubled?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I had a reel go viral this week, like actual proper viral this morning.
Because if you can believe it, Layne doesn't believe in sharing like at all. She's like the worst sharer.
And by sharing, we mean toddler sharing.
No, just any sharing.
I don't share anything.
I think that's what people were confused about, which is where the conflict came in. People
so
are like, but sharing is important. I'm like, I don't think they got it.
No, they didn't get it. Anyways, I had a reel go actual viral. It's at 1.6 million this morning, which is so cool.
That's huge.
I got a ton of views on TikTok also.
Wow.
Which was just an interesting journey to be like, oh, same deal. So I've actually done something here that we should study. What I did was accidentally say something very controversial by removing a couple of modifying words.
Oh.
This is a reel that like I batched some content. At the end, I was like, oh, I have a thought about sharing. Said a thing pretty randomly, thought it was pretty regular. And then when I sat down to post it, I wrote a pretty moderate headline.
Okay.
I almost posted it and then was like, you know what? I should just pull out a couple of those words so that it's shorter.
So that it's
and then it was a very definitive statement, which is not what I was thinking. I was thinking make it shorter.
Right.
And then it turned out
interesting.
Everyone's mad. Not everyone. Most people are stoked.
It's all you need is enough people to be mad to leave comments about how like this doesn't make any sense or whatever. And then people will defend it and then you get a lot of activity and then the algorithm is loving it.
They are loving that part.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot about content this week.
That's amazing. But so today we should talk about it, right?
So today we're going to talk about it. I keep talking about it a little more and a little more and a little more. And I think that today we'll just take this long form piece to say my piece.
Great.
About toddlers and sharing.
Yes.
I think I'm just going to play the audio
of
the reel so you guys can just hear it. I do a little bit have rude face on when I look at the video. I'm like, well,
you're like, no wonder they thought she was sassy.
Okay.
If I'm using something, I don't have to stop using that thing and let somebody else use it before I'm done. That's not a life skill. That's people pleasing. Your toddler can't do it, shouldn't do it. They can practice boundaries. They can say, I'm still using it. They can practice noticing when they're done. Hey buddy, when you're done, will you let me know? Somebody else wants that. So when you're all done, bring it to me. It's thoughtfulness. They can practice waiting when someone's using something they want. Oh, I can tell that you really want that thing. They're still using it. So we're going to have to do something else until they're done. The idea that anyone should stop using something they're using and give it to someone else just because they want it, what are we doing?
There you go.
So I've listened to that a lot in the last week, especially as people got more and more upset. And I mean it.
And that's the end of the
episode. But the sentence that I wrote at the top was toddler sharing is actually just people pleasing. What I originally wrote was most toddler sharing is usually just people pleasing.
That's funny.
And then I took out most and I changed usually to actually. And that's it.
Yeah.
Literally, that's it. And it turned into this whole thing about how this is why we're raising the most entitled generation.
I was reading these
This
too.
is why.
Yes.
This is everything that's wrong with parenting today.
Yes.
Everything.
Yeah, all of it. You did it.
I did it.
Congratulations. And she's not even a mom yet.
I'm not even famous.
Wow.
So that's the statement.
Yeah.
And
but I would love to expand on this.
Yeah. Let's get really into it. Basically, the key points are toddler, right? This is where we should start, is that the very first word, which is toddler. Toddlers are a little bit older than 1 to a little bit older than 3. The whole goal of this time in being a human, what you're developing, is a self for the very first time. You just realize that you exist, that you're not the same as mom. Whoa. That you can like wander around and that you can come back. And now you have to figure out like, I am here. I'm distinct. There's a me here. And what effect can I have on my environment? You spend a whole year and a half really figuring that out. You're so focused on figuring out what it means to exist, what it is to be something, that you're not available to think about other people. Like inside your brain, it's not possible. They do experiments with this where like if you put a teddy bear on a table and I sit on one side and a toddler sits on the other and the teddy bear is facing them, they will talk about the teddy bear as though I can see it the way that they can see it.
Oh,
it's not
cute.
possible for it to occur to them that I'm looking at something different. It's part of why they're freaking out all the time is because they really actually don't understand like why I can't just get on board with what we want.
Yeah, why isn't your experience their experience?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or why I'm talking about something that's different than what they're looking at. Like if they ever try to tell you a story or describe something and you're just like so lost and it's so frustrating to them because they know what they're looking at. You know that you can't see what they're looking at, but they really don't know that. Like they honestly think that their perspective just is what there is.
Yeah.
And that's totally developmentally appropriate. It's totally okay. You can't stay there past that developmental stage. That would be totally inappropriate, totally underdeveloped for you to stay that way. When we meet adults who are egocentric, it's a real problem for them.
Sure.
But toddlers are supposed to be. Your developmental skills, your social skills, and your self-concept, like these things build upon one another. You do one stage, and then you do the next stage, and then you do the next stage. When you're about 5, you're ready to really start integrating everything and letting it all work together in a way that's very efficient. But before that, you're really kind of doing just a couple of things at a time. So these little ones, toddler sharing is what we're talking about, they're not available to think about other people. Now, once in a while, we see them kind of explore other people in a way that's interesting. We might see them offer someone something because they might like it or try to include somebody a little, but really that's just kind of a glimmer of the future. It's still them being like, inside my own perspective, I'm curious what will happen if I do this thing, not actually come, let's play with this thing together, or I'm taking care of how you feel. It's more like, that's a loud noise. That's a weird face. Oh, adults do this to me sometimes when I make that noise. What happens if it's very exploratory and that's beautiful and great, wonderful. But I say that just to say to the folks in my comments who are like, my 1-year-old fucking loves to share. I'm like, no, they don't. No, they don't. That's really how lovely and fun that's what your person is interested in exploring right now is other people. Like, that's cool. But I tell you confidently and from like a neutral place of like no judgment to that person, but actually inside their brain, it's fully self-motivated exploration.
Yeah,
yes.
right.
It is not interpenetrative. It is not cooperation. It is not collaboration. It's still only them. There's just them. There's just now. And there's just what they're looking at. That's really all that exists. And they'll chatter about other things because language is fun and they're using different vocabulary words. They'll talk about yesterday, but it's not, almost never it's actual yesterday, right?
Right.
Like there's all kinds of practice and exploration, but for real, what's inside is specific. Toddlers are very specific. They should grow with time. Let me be clear. I don't think that no one should ever negotiate materials in space. I'm saying that toddlers are not doing that. Whether or not that's my moral value for them, whether or not that's my long-term goal, whether or not like that's just really important to me that people share, like it doesn't matter. They are what they are, and this is what they can do and this is what they can't do. And so just starting with toddler, that's what a toddler is. And it's good. It's so good. And they really need to explore themselves and they really need to explore materials. And I'll get into this at the end. I have a little bit of a structure for how I want to lay this out. Cool. And at the end, it's very like, well, what I do instead. Yeah. Like, because of course the negotiation of materials has to happen. Like people exist in the same space as each other. But
how can that free a mom or parent to understand that toddlers can't share yet? They really can't share yet. Because that can actually be freeing information if you understand that. Could you tell us about how the freedom that can come to the mom listening to be like, because it's not anyone being reprimanded. Like it's more like, here's something really interesting and helpful. Toddlers can't share yet. So
That's not a thing that you have to worry about. So your
Yeah.
kid is not the mean one who's keeping
There
all the
is.
stuff. So other people telling you that you do need to teach your kid how to share,
It's just not the right
they
time
just
yet.
never mean sharing either, by the way. They just mean giving your stuff over, which we're about to get into. Outside adults being like, your kid needs to learn how to share. Those people are 100% wrong every time.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
like you just get to shut those kinds of voices out. And I really feel like my goal forever in providing information about toddlers comes out of how good it felt to finally be like, oh, I can come into alignment with you guys. Like my goals for you can be reasonable. We actually can work together in a way that's not going to just be so endlessly frustrating and confusing to
both
me
of you.
because I know what you can do and I know what you can't do.
Yeah,
So then
that's
I
great.
know what I should do,
Yeah.
right? I should really make you do these things. I should really support you in these other areas and a bunch of this other stuff. I should just be like, later,
Yeah,
tuck it away.
that's great.
So that's
that.
I think where a lot of the peace and freedom should come from. But I also feel like a lot of the most interesting comments for me, to be clear, I've read like 30% of these because they got
you
crazy
can.
so quickly.
That's good.
A lot of the early comments were adults being like, oh my gosh, I totally do that. So I screenshotted a couple because I thought they were so poignant. And when I hit those points, I'm going to read them to you guys because I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
And we're gonna, here's a little spoiler, we're gonna record another episode right after this one where we just talk about people pleasing really heavily, and in a much more like us adults, raw
totally.
feelings kind of way, because both the sharing really seemed to strike people, but also really the people pleasing. So I hope that there's kind of always that little bait and switch for you guys when we talk about things where there's this little moment of self-reflection inside of being like, maybe that's why I can't eat the last thing out of a box even when everybody else has had plenty and I want it. I want it. They don't. Everybody seems fine. I should be the one to have it. Like that feeling of just like, I cannot be that person, you know, like it comes from somewhere.
Totally.
So those are the things I hope you get, like the calmness that comes with clarity, the ability to hold your own boundaries about other people's perception, and just the ability to like meet your kid a little bit where they can be met now and not worry so much about some of this stuff that's for later. Of course, they're going to be generous. Of course, they're going to grow into good cooperators and good friends and kind, loving people.
Yeah.
And some of that starts now, but really not in this way.
Sure. That's great.
Great. This is my structure for today to help myself just know where we're going. We've talked about what I said. We're talking about why they can't do some sharing a little bit more. And then we're going to talk about what people mean when they say sharing. And I got stuff to say about that. And then I want to get a little bit at the end into like what I do instead. So if you've listened to me talk about this for a week and a half and you're like, can we just get to the meat? You can also jump to the end if you want. I got thousands of comments about like, well, that's not what sharing is. Sharing is actually taking turns. Well, sharing is actually this. Well, when it's a community thing, then they have to share. Well, when there's a ton of stuff, well, then they have to share. That's, you clearly don't understand
How a swing set works.
My position is that the definition of sharing doesn't matter if we're talking about toddlers, right? Assuming that we are not talking about 4-year-olds or 6-year-olds or 16-year-olds or grown-ups. Like we're talking about toddlers. I don't really care how you define it. I don't really care to like make a new definition for what sharing means, because to me, I'm like, categorically, this is not a thing that we need to be worrying about. Children play with what they're playing with. When they're near one another, they play next to each other, not with each other. Like if you hold your little hands out, they call it parallel play, next to. And then later it turns interpenetrative. They turn toward each other and their play begins to cross over and affect one another. So even two toddlers who are temporarily playing with the same thing, neither one of them thinks that they're playing together. I am playing with this toy. This is a cool aspect of it that this other person is here. That other person also thinks, I am playing with this toy. Whoa, friend, fun, okay. But like, it's not like we are playing together. It's going to be fairly short-lived and it's going to be very, very simple. They're passing something back and forth. They're running their own car up along the wall and just being like, James, follow me. They're doing their own deal. They don't actually play together. So the idea that we should be out in a park being like, okay, guys, play together. Okay. Share that back and forth. Okay, you're going to use it sometimes and he's going to use it sometimes. Like that's not a thing they can hold in their brains. So I'm not real interested in being like, well, what do you mean by sharing? I'm saying like, ditch it. Let's know what they can do and support the thing that they can do. Let's step this out. So you and I, Layne and Jess, share a beverage, right?
Okay.
We could absolutely share a beverage. That could be a delightful thing for us to do. I don't want a whole soda.
Sure.
You don't want a whole soda. We're going to share it.
Okay.
But I'm a person who's noticing, like, we've already negotiated. Of like, I actually know what I want. What do you want? Okay, interesting. I think we could interact over what we both want. I'm going to drink some soda and you're going to drink some soda. And I'm going to be kind of keeping an eye on how much I'm using to make sure that, like, you're using the right amount.
Yeah.
Or you're going to also be noticing what I'm using and what I'm not using. And you may be like, she's not good at sharing. I'm not going to do that with her later or whatever.
Right.
But like each of us has consensually negotiated something and we're keeping the other person in mind. I'm thinking about me and I'm also thinking about you.
Yes.
And I think that those skills are required for kind of any definition of sharing so far that I've read, and I've gotten quite a few.
Okay.
I have to be able to think about you and me at the same time.
Yeah.
We both have to be able to consent to this. And there has to be some kind of negotiating skills. So if a toddler doesn't know that I have a perspective or that I have desires, they can't be thinking about me at the same time as they're thinking about themselves. They can't consent to using something together because they don't know what that means. And they don't have any skills for negotiating. So whether you want to call it turns, which people are very excited about, it's not sharing, it's turns.
Sure.
Like, all right, that's certainly a step closer to something reasonable in my mind. Like, however you want to get around it, we're asking more than can be done here. For a toddler, there's only I have it or I don't have it. And even if we're using it together, I have it and you're also here.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so it's the same with taking turns, but to them, the turn just means I do or I don't have it. It's not I'm going to regulate my feelings around like it's my turn and then at some point it's going to stop being my turn. There's just like I have it, later I won't have it.
Sure.
Yeah, in both cases it's just an adult telling you when you can't have it, and that's totally fine. It's totally fine for you, the adults, to be the one negotiating.
Yeah.
Or deciding what happens with materials, deciding what happens with space. That's totally your right. In fact, as we'll get to, it's very important that you are the one who is in charge of who gets what and when. But I don't want us to trick ourselves into thinking that that's them sharing something. That's still me keeping an eye on how much stuff is everywhere. And that's just going to generate a different response in me than the idea that my goal is for them to share something, knowing that like I'm the one who's in charge of stuff and I'm keeping an eye on these things. Then if I take a toy from someone and I give it to someone else, I know what I need to do, which is not say, buddy, this is sharing. Feel good about the fact that you shared. It's I've removed something from you and that thing is gone. So now we're going to have to deal with the fact that you want something that you can't have, right? Or if there's a child who's trying to take something and I'm saying, no, that's not available to you right now. Someone else has that. Like those are the kinds of, we're on those terms and we're going to dig really deep into that because I do have thoughts about appropriately making sure everybody gets what they need.
Yeah.
Fine. Any version of that stuff that you want to do, go for it. Just know that it's not them cooperating over something. They're not sharing.
Yeah, which means when the child is finishing their time on the swing in order to give the next child a turn, or finishing their time with the toy in order for the other kid to have an experience with the toy, it's a loss to the kid.
Yeah.
Because developmentally, that's all it is. It's just a loss. And so then you tend to the loss versus treating it like a lesson in sharing, which they're just not there yet. Later, it can be a lesson in sharing. It could be a seed towards the plant of sharing.
Absolutely.
But in this stage, it's just now they're a new person. They're newly having an experience with something. And now you as an adult, you are preferring other adults and children. And that's also probably healthy and good.
Totally
but
fine.
It's just how to relate to the kid in the process.
Yes.
Right.
And what I'm like really advocating against is acting like it's their moral failing for being upset when their turn is over.
Sure.
This kid is bad at sharing. This kid doesn't care about other people.
Right.
Because they didn't want to give a thing up. Like
right.
that is reasonable.
Sure.
To a child who has lost something that they're not done with, it feels like an injustice, and there are feelings about that. And they are not a bad kid or a bad friend or a bad community member when they're 1 and 2 and early 3 in that circumstance. Like they're not the one who is lacking some kind of important social and moral value.
That makes sense.
Now, these more reasonable things that we're touching on here, this is not what most people mean when they talk about sharing. This is even like this level, which is, I'm saying, is still not possible.
Yeah.
This is not what most people mean. Usually when your mother-in-law is like, well, you need to teach him how to share, she does not mean this that we're talking about. And this is why I made that reel. Most sharing is pure conflict avoidance on the part of adults.
The page turn.
Usually, when adults are talking about sharing, they are trying to appease a more upset child and avoid a tantrum, whether that's the littler one or just the kid in a group who's more volatile or whatever, or they're trying to appease other adults. Like most of the time when your kid gets instructed, buddy, you have to share, it's either because somebody took something out of their hands and they snatched back, and now because they were using it and now they're the one who's doing the snatching, or because somebody else's kid has edged up on their space and they don't want that kid in their space, and it's, oh buddy, you got to share because you don't want that other mom to feel like your kid is the one who's the hoarder or the whatever. Usually, as I said in that reel, most of the time I really, really feel that what people mean is it doesn't matter that you're not done using that. Somebody else wants it. Give it up. Like really, in daycares and even in like more educational settings, in church babysitting situations, in group babysitting situations, in play dates, it's a lot of being like, oh, trying to keep these little toddlers from getting into any kind of fight so that there's no explosion, either because we really, really, really don't want the tantrum, or because we're really, really, really nervous about what other adults think.
Sure.
Right? If you got a kid who's like really defending the thing that they're actually using and they're using their body to do it, they're getting corrected for hitting. They're getting corrected for being the one who's not sharing. Like it's a lot of that. And that's what I mean about the people pleasing. Like if you are a person who's using a thing and for no reason that you can understand, somebody else wants it. So you lose that thing. And then you're told like, this is the good way to be. That is a foundational pattern that leads to people pleasing later in life. That is one of the ways that turns us into that kind of thing, especially if we are the kinds of little kids who are pretty motivated by praise from adults. And we quickly realize that what adults want from us, we get that smile, we get that gentle, happy voice at us when we give away the thing that we're using. Oh, we're the sharers. Oh, we're the good ones.
Right.
We learn like, this is how I get praise. This is how I get close. This is how I get affection, to just be like, oh, I don't need that. Oh, I won't fight about that. Oh, they pulled that out of my hands, but I'll just let it go. Like these are little kid things, but these are big kid things, right? I'm just going to let that person take credit for my work at work because, you know, I'm the good one by avoiding the conflict. Like I stay out of the thing. I don't upset the baby.
Yeah, I'm not disruptive.
And my mama is so grateful that I don't upset the baby. Even though I'm hard at work trying to learn how this world functions, trying to learn what my effect is on the world. And this baby is destroying the beautiful, important science of play that I'm doing. But it's more important to me that my mama feels happy about me. So I just let the baby do it. Sometimes you even get toddlers who they'll like wander away from a conflict and then you'll realize they're over there crying. Like they've gone away somewhere to have their little feeling. Like this stuff, the shape of these things gets into us very, very early. And of course, many other kinds of things lead to people pleasing. And of course, not everyone who's ever been experienced a misuse of the idea of sharing is now like racked with people pleasing.
Yeah.
And because we have 45 minutes to an hour here to talk about this, there's space for me to say that, unlike the 45-second reel, where I can only say the one idea. Like, of course, it's most toddler sharing is usually just people pleasing, not toddler sharing is people pleasing, right?
No, that's great.
Like, but that is a real kind of thing. And I especially just feel, you know, older generations of people looking at smaller children, there just is kind of this extra tendency to see them as entitled. And I feel like this word sharing and these words entitled and words like selfish get really doled out very, very quickly from in-laws and our moms and aunts and uncles and old ladies in the grocery store who, you know, didn't see the older kid pull that thing out of the little kid's hands. They just see the little kid screaming and taking it back because they had it.
Right.
And for them to let it go would not be sharing. It would not be sharing if your older brother snatched something from you. For you to let it go, that's not sharing.
Right.
What? As I said, what are we doing?
Yeah,
you know,
right.
like it's a real outcry of my soul to be like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
That's not the value. That's not a life skill. That is people pleasing, right? If you're the one who just gets taken from and gets trampled on and people call it, thanks for cooperating, that is the stuff that leads you toward people pleasing tendencies. It just is. That's that part. A lot of people are very worried about what I said in terms of children who hoard toys.
Okay.
That is one of the big protests. So I do want to talk about hoarding just a little bit.
Meaning like in a public space or just their own toys?
Yeah, all of it. All of it. I've seen every version of this now.
Wow.
Which, oh my gosh, so much community feedback. It's
Yeah,
so
sure.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Even the nasty ones are being like, well, that is an interesting response to this. Wow. Yeah, people are very concerned about either a lot about swings, a lot about bubbles, and a lot about when there's 30 dinosaurs. Do you get to have them all?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, are you using them? Because if you're using them, that's something.
Yeah.
Now, if you're sitting on all the toys like a little chicken sitting on some eggs, interesting. Because we get different things going on, right? I am advocating for really letting a child who's really using something really use it for the entire day if they want to. If they're using it, you can see them interacting with something. Personally, I don't care how long they want to use it. I don't care. They are engaged in the invaluable science of play. They have to. Everything they learn in life is through play and through interactions with caregivers. Those are like the two ways that toddlers are learning. And they're learning so quickly and they have to do it. It is a matter of their survival that they figure everything out. So they're engaged in this vital work of building a brain, frankly. And if that means that they need to use that thing all day long, I'm going to let them. Now, you can make a different choice about that. You can have a different value about that if you'd like to, but that is my perspective. I'm also an educator and not a parent, and so that may come into play about how you want to think about that part.
Okay. Here's a real story.
Yeah.
At a children's museum, long line of kids, all pretty young. It's like this activity where you're like throwing a ball, I think, or like shooting a ball or something through a hole, and the kid just is never not done. And the line is very long. Everyone paid to be there. And parents are saying nothing. Are you advocating that they stay as long as they want? Because I would disagree. But you can.
Yeah.
Because then to me it becomes about the parent being insensitive to every other parent who also wants their children to have an experience of the children's museum.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to say, just think about what I would do. Because I also, if a parent wants to really argue with me about that and they're like, my value is that this child spend themselves on their learning. I paid. There is other stuff here for people to do.
Sure.
I'm going to give it to them. I'm not labeling those people as anything. If it's me, I think you should stay there for a long time. I think if your kid is really interested in that, you should go ahead and stay for a long time if you really want to.
Yeah.
And also go ahead and think about other people. It's not that your kid's going to share with those other people.
No.
It's that you're going to say.
As the waiter in the line,
Yeah.
it wasn't looking at the kid being like, when is the kid going to realize all of these other children are here? It was actually more like, when is the parent going to realize that there's like all these, like if they were in my shoes, I don't assume they would be like, take as long as you want. Right. You paid. I would assume they'd be like, thanks for preferring the whole crew. Please let your kids have a good time. And please move on. And there's a line. Just get back in the line if this is your favorite thing. But I definitely am not assuming kid should know that these three behind them would also want to turn. Yeah.
Which let's do this. Let's see if this feels like a compromise. I think that's grown-ups sharing.
I agree.
Let's call that grown-up sharing.
Which is what I would say about many public things. Public swing set, I don't assume kids are going to know when they should give the other kid a turn. Unless they're, I think Eloise, she's 8. I think she's aware enough of other people. She's also she's also not expected to just get off whenever, but I think she's aware to see like there's a little kid just dangling on the pole waiting for a turn.
Yeah.
Eventually she's going to get up and move over to give them an opportunity to use the same activity.
But honestly, if you're at a park and there's a lot of stuff to do and everybody lives near that, you can reasonably assume your taxes paid for your kid to be able to swing on that swing. I feel like if Eloise needs to spend 4 hours because what her body is wanting is to rock and rock and rock and rock and rock, I'm okay if Eloise never gets off that swing.
Yeah.
Like I might be okay with that.
That could be a cultural disagreement as well. Because there are many places in the world where that would be like culturally unacceptable.
Sure.
Because even like we've been on some places where we would go and stay for some months, and like you bring a snack to the group, like you bring your own snack to the group, and everyone in the room from the place looks at you excited to try your snack, because in their culture you wouldn't bring something to the room full of people without the understanding that what we have is what we have. And so there's like this awkwardness of like, oh, okay, that's not actually American. Like I wouldn't have assumed that everyone would be excited to try my snack. I would just assume my snack is my snack, and what did they bring? And sure, if you want to ask for a bite, ask for a bite.
Yeah.
But some of it, I think, depending on where people are listening,
Sure,
might say like, oh, that's very something that is not where we live.
Yeah.
We are much more community, or like warm culture versus cold culture.
Yeah, somebody did stitch my video on a TikTok to be like, I just want to be really clear that this blew my mind for a second. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I'm from a collectivist culture. This person is clearly from an individualist culture.
Right.
So, if that hits you in an intense way, it did me too.
Sure.
And then she moved on. I was like, fair.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. Of course, always everything you're going to need to filter through your own family and cultural values.
Right.
Just on a brain development. No.
Yeah.
Like
that's where it's about
where
the
I'm
parent versus the toddler.
Yeah. But I'm going to advocate for kids being able to really use things. So part of that is coming from, I'm going to get to that part in a second. I'm going to put a little pin in that.
Yeah, perfect.
Because I want to keep talking about different kinds of hoarding.
Cool.
So adults are going to make their own choices about community spaces, right? Now, I do think there are a lot of moms hurrying little kids off of swings because someone else has appeared.
For sure.
A lot of moms who don't know how to say it. I think we're actually going to be here for a minute just to let you guys know. Because you too, your experience, and we'll talk about this more in the people-pleasing episode, your experience is as important and as valuable as any other person's experience.
Yeah.
Not more than other people. You don't get to take up more space than others, but you do get to fill up the appropriate amount of space for a person. It totally matters that you experience your life and that you get to use the things that are available to you just like everybody else. A lot of us out here making ourselves really small. Yeah. Really small.
Totally.
Because we really don't want to be in
it's like
anybody's
the grown-up
way
people pleasers.
Ever.
Yeah,
yes.
of course.
Yes. And so that's something for you to notice in yourself. Am I rushing my child off the swing because I'm scared that this mom is going to think something bad about me? Or do I really think that she's had her good fill and that there are some other things she could really enjoy and we're ready to move on here?
Yeah.
That's what I think about community spaces. The thing about hoarding is that I don't think hoarding is a sharing issue. Hoarding is an anxiety and control issue. Most of the time when you see a child who's like hanging on for dear life to like a toy or to all of these kinds of toys, it's because they're stressed, because they are likely to get their stuff taken away or to be interrupted in a way that they can't predict. They're experiencing somewhere in their life, probably from adults, maybe from a sibling, maybe it's just kind of the group dynamic, that a lot of things get snatched from them early. So they are not in a relaxed space where they can be actually playing with something and learning from it. They are in an anxiety space where they are just trying to make sure that they're going to be able to have what they need in their life.
And like how helpless, right? Yes. To just be there and then all of a sudden it's going to be gone. Yeah, that's
you have
stressful.
No idea when. You don't get, there aren't patterns of communication that help you know when some things are going to get moved away from you. And nobody's helping you recover from feelings when you do lose something. Like that puts you in this like tight grip state. Also, a child who has no control in any area of their life is that need for control is just going to spurt out at random.
Makes sense.
So I don't think that hoarding is mostly a sharing issue. I think it's mostly this child is not feeling protected or safe in their own body. They don't feel like they have reasonable control in areas of their life. So if you're seeing a lot of hoarding from your own child, let's look around for like, okay, are there places in life where they do get to make choices about what happens to them? Do they kind of know what's coming? Like, is there a routine, enough of a routine built into their life that they kind of know what's going to happen to them when I need to change something? Am I letting them know ahead of time enough that they can still be upset about it? They're still not going to like it. It's an interruption, but they can kind of know that it's coming. Are there some ways I can build some shared power or some shared control into their life so that there's some stuff that they do feel like they're reasonably, if they're 1 and 2, right? Very little, some small things that they feel like they're part of making choices about how their life goes. And are there ways that I can be protecting their time a little better? Like, am I just letting them get taken from? Are they the littlest one? So they just get are they the middle one? And they just get kind of swept along because the little one is loud and the bigger one is got more going on,
Noisier or
like
something.
Yeah. It's usually not that they have a character flaw, which is that they won't share.
Sure.
Right? It's that there's a reason that this little person feels like they're needing to protect what's theirs. Exceptions. This is an area where if there's ever like any kind of developmental difference, whether that's going to be some neurodivergence that you're about to find out as they start to hit 3, or delays in speech or delays in motor function, or any early trauma, intrauterine exposure to substances makes impulse control really hard, and that can cause some fixation. So there are some reasons, and usually that you can clue into that if it's a little more targeted. Sometimes there's a child that another child is like, I'm always going to take that kid's stuff. Whoa, that's also not a sharing problem. That's usually there's a little something else going on that's on the impulse control or the self-regulatory side, which I'm not prepared to get into now. Or like desperate fixation on a single item. That item is probably holding what they call like a transitional object role, where that child is using that item as sort of a way to soothe themselves as something is changing inside. It's a kind of a more complicated topic also that we could get into someday, but I want to make a note for that. As we're talking about hoarding, sometimes there are these really heightened anxiety and control behaviors, and that's a little bit less of this just general like massaging of tight muscles that I'm talking about, you know? So if you're seeing a lot of hoarding from your child, I saw a lot of people say really mean things about their own children.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh.
My child is just an absolute asshole and he just wants to keep everything from everybody and blah, blah, blah. So I just want to flag some of that too. It's also just some scary stuff in there, but also just some people being very flippant. People can be really flippant about toddlers and that can be funny, and it also can be like, do you mean that?
Right.
Do you know this is a comment on Instagram and nobody knows that nobody can hear your joking voice? Probably they're not. Probably there's some other place again that needs to be kind of massaged out, some anxiety somewhere that would loosen the grip on this. Like, I have to have all the dinosaurs, or I have to rush to the truck so that nobody else can get it.
Totally.
And also sometimes there's just favorite stuff and a looser grip from the parent too, knowing that a lot of things fluctuate and favorite things happen for a while and then favorite things drop. They're toddlers. They actually really don't have that much of an attention span. They're actually not going to keep that toy till they're 16. They might just be really pumped on it for a couple of weeks. And there will be times for you to take it from them and move it along. But also maybe there's just going to be a little while of being like, yeah, guys, that's his favorite right now. I'm going to go ahead and let him just have a favorite thing for a bit. Yeah. And we'll keep talking about this.
Makes sense.
So that's how I feel about hoarding.
Yeah.
Which people were very concerned about, and God bless them. So instead, because we do have to negotiate space. We do all live in the same homes. We live in the same schools. We go to the same libraries. To me, I don't care about sharing. I don't think we ever have to talk about this again. Like,
this isn't actually her big thing.
I know, I can't believe it's just a calm thing that I've never done.
Yeah.
Been like, well, that's okay, great. Not developmentally appropriate. Then we won't.
Yeah.
Just moved along. It's not about sharing. It also is not about fair. I don't care about fair. I care about everybody gets what they need. My value, and this may be different from your value, but my value is that everybody gets what they need. And I say that all of the time when I was a classroom teacher, and I think it all the time in my life. And even in my home where I just negotiate with one other grown-up where we want diametrically different things. Yeah. Is like, sometimes somebody did a lot more dishes. Sometimes somebody did a lot more of this. But like, everybody gets what they need, right? Everybody gets what they need means that everybody gets something different. And I think that's the real power of it, is being like, I am the adult. I'm in charge here. And I make sure that everybody gets what they need. I looked around and I saw that today I really think that your brother needs to be allowed to keep playing with that dinosaur. That's what I decided. I'm going to let him. I'm going to let him keep doing that. That's so tough that you want that you want a thing that you can't have. That's a tough feeling. Let's deal with that and let's find something that's going to work for you.
Yeah.
My decision is, I know he's been playing with it for a long time. He's using it in a way that I think is really cool. And I just think that that's what I'm going to do. I think he needs that. Tomorrow we might do something different, and that's allowed. Everything can be different on every different day.
Well, and it helps when it's your own kids, because if you do that with one, you probably do that with all of them. So then there's more of an understanding of like, oh, mom's doing the thing. She's doing the thing where she sees what our need is and lets us do it, even if the other sibling doesn't like it in that moment. So I think, that makes so much sense. It's probably tougher when you're with strangers and you're knowing that that's the way you do things, but then you're feeling nervous for the dynamics that go on in these other people's lives, or the park, or these probably preschool is interesting because you're getting so many different families in one place. Yeah. But yeah, that makes sense.
That's the exact same language that I'm using with parents in a preschool classroom. You know what? You're right. It's not fair. Sarah, I just don't do fair in my classroom. Here, I just make sure everybody gets what they need. And I really feel like they're still using it. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that toy over here. Let's look around. What else? What can we find for Isaiah? Absolutely. Let's figure something out.
Because the question is then, what does Isaiah need, right?
Yeah.
So then it's looking for Isaiah.
What
Isaiah thinks he needs the dino.
Yeah.
Because it's right there.
Oh, I'm glad we're saying this, because this is the thing I forgot to say.
Okay.
What Isaiah doesn't need is for me to take something away from someone else and give it to him because he wants it. That's the entitled child. The child who pulled back on the thing somebody else snatched from is not the entitled child. That's the child who was using it.
Right.
The child who pulled harder, got the thing, and then was told like, oh, you keep that thing. We'll just make this other kid share with you.
Yeah, right.
That's the no thank you for me. I won't let Isaiah experience that. I will help Isaiah with the feeling of wanting something you can't have, because that's tough. And I will help Isaiah find something that works for him. Yeah. That's boundaries.
That's great.
The two things that I do think you can be teaching toddlers in this space around the negotiation of things are, number one, that boundary. I'm using it. When I'm done. No, when I'm done. Giving a child the ability to protect their space, to protect what they're using, to protect their experience of what's happening. Like, that is so powerful in the self-building phase, which is what they're doing. They're building a self right now. So learning how to hold the edges of that self, learning how to feel empowered enough to politely, kindly say, no, when I'm done. No, I'm using it. Like, that's so powerful. A child who is equipped to healthfully say, I'm still using that, is a child who doesn't need to sit on all 30 dinosaurs, right? Like, that's not a kid who needs that part. And a child who knows that the adult around them is going to either help them defend their boundary or help them deal with it if something goes the way that they don't want it to go. Like, that's a kid whose mind is going to be relaxed enough to really learn, to really explore, to start thinking about other people when the time is right. Right? Like, those things are super important. Am I here? Am I safe? Does my experience matter? These are the things we protect by giving them powerful boundaries. Yeah. Simple, age-appropriate, powerful boundaries. There will be plenty of times when you have to say, I know you're using it. I love to be able to respect those words. Right now, I have to take that thing away. I'm sorry, that's going to be tough. There are lots of reasons why that has to happen. I'm not saying that their word is bond and that no one can override their boundary, but their ability to say that and then for you to respond, that's so powerful. And then the other thing is providing emotional support for the one who can't have it. The truth is, there are a lot of things in life we can't have. That's the other side of this whole discussion about sharing, is that on the other side is Isaiah, who wants the thing. I'm not taking from someone else just to satisfy his want. Sometimes he will need something, right? I don't know. I don't have to think about an example. I'm not doing that.
You just might need longer with the thing he's playing with, and someone else might want it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to let somebody believe that their whims and their feelings gets to take over this entire room, that like their desire gets to override everybody else's desire either. We're also not doing that. Right. So one of the very, very painful things about being a human is that we want stuff and we cannot have all of it. We have deep, 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 important, real desires that are not going to be met a lot of times a day. Every day. It's really hard. And getting really good support about the appropriate and reasonable times where you want something that you can't have is so vital to being a healthy grown-up. And that is vital to empathy building. and to being a good community member in life. Learning early, there are going to be limits to what I want and can't have, to what I want and can have. There will be limits to what I can have of what I want.
Yeah.
Like that's going to set you up to be ready to negotiate and cooperate in a group later. Whereas if you're a person who's just like, when I don't get something, I just explode because no one has helped me put words around that. No one has helped me feel the process of having the feeling passing, us recovering, us moving on. I just continue to be someone who explodes when I can't have what I want.
Yeah.
That's going to fuck up your sharing when you're 6, right?
Right.
You're going to cry every time people don't do what you want. I feel like we all remember playing with 6 and 7-year-olds when we were 6 and 7 who were like, every time the game doesn't go their way, they just cry. Like that's a kid who's bad at sharing
Right.
and not because they didn't let people take stuff out of their hands when they were little, but because nobody helped them really cope with this feeling of like, dang, I really can't have that. How do we get what we need? How do we get what we need through this, recover, find something else? What even are the words to say, can I have it when you're done?
Right.
Okay, when you're done, that's still not going to resolve itself perfectly when you're 2, but asking, have the feeling, ask, okay, maybe later, let's do a different thing. And then sometimes you get that thing that you asked for. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Sometimes they're
right?
done fast.
Yes. Sometimes they're done now.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were already kind of done and
Yeah.
just hadn't moved on to the next thing and they'll hand
Right.
it over. Cool. Asking for what you need, recovering when you can't have it. Like these are appropriate toddler skills. These are the skills that if they get built down in this level, if they get baked in at that layer, you can build on those for really strong friendships, for great negotiations, for great self-regulation. Like those are the things that I'm focusing on.
That's good.
Okay. Useful language. Useful language. Here we go. All the toys are mine. You, Jessica, with your husband, Sean, purchased every toy in your house.
Okay.
Someone gave it to your family. You're in charge of your family. All the toys are yours. You got them for those children to use. No, Jules, all the toys are mine. I got them for you to use. I'll let you know how it's appropriate to use them in our house. This is how you can use them. This is how you can't use them. It's not yours. It's not fair. Those toys belong to this house. They belong to this classroom. I even had a fun one where there's a director. I could just be like, all the toys are Miss Brittany's. That is not your toy. That is Miss Brittany's toy. And I borrowed it from her so you guys could play with it. This is how it's going to go.
Yeah.
I keep the power in my hand. I'm the adult. I'm in charge of how space gets used. I'm in charge of how toys get used. So if I need to say that things are done, that's fine. That's totally fine. We will deal with the aftermath of those feelings. But I'm the one who's in charge of how the toys go. I make sure that everybody gets what they need. Done. That's enough of a reason for everything. They're not really going to hear that many more words than that anyways, right? So you could go into this big old explanation, but it's enough to say like, no, I make sure everybody gets what they need and I can tell that we need to be done here. I can tell that this toy needs to move over here. Also, that's not available. It doesn't really matter to a 1 or 2-year-old that somebody else is using it. Maybe around 3, that's starting to be kind of a reasonable reason, but it's just not available. That's not available. We'll see when it's available. Really simple, really clean, really tidy, right? Because it's really just a yes or a no for them in their mind. So we're just using neutral, respectful, clear words that doesn't blame anything on anyone, right? If it's like, you can't have that because that other kid has it, well, great. I'll just go make sure that other kid doesn't have it anymore.
Right.
And then I can have it.
Yeah.
You know, like this is the kind of like brute strength that we see from toddlers. Oh, I can't have it because they have it. Problem solved.
Get rid of it. No problem.
Remove that person.
Yeah.
It's just not available. That thing's not available. And when I'm done, when you're done, are you done? What I want for toddlers, I want toddlers to use the things that are in their hands. I want them to explore those things to their absolute limits. I want them to test their whole brand new self against the materials that there are in the world, right? I want them to know when they're done. I want them to relinquish those things when they're done. Now, real learning and exploration requires a relaxed enough brain to like be present, to focus, to be with something. Really, it takes about 15 minutes for children to settle into any kind of activity. They're just sampling before then, whether it's in their own playroom or on a playground or in a preschool classroom. That's why free play is so long, ideally inside of a preschool classroom. It should be 45 to 60 minutes long. like minimally,
Wow.
because they're going to spend 15 minutes just finding out like who is where and what obstacles are there and like dumping out this thing and tasting that one. And just like, it's just a little sample tray. It takes a long time for them to like settle into something. So if you're setting some kind of timer every 5 minutes, just know that you're staying at very surface level play and learning here. Which you can do. I just want you to know about what's happening there.
Yeah.
If they're really going to engage with something and explore and learn, it takes a while to settle in, and they have to be relaxed enough to trust that like, I'm really going to get to sit here and be with this thing. So my goal is that they feel fulfilled and satisfied. And again, that's my experiences inside of an educational space. So there's plenty of variation for you guys to do whatever you need to do in your life.
Sure.
But like learning, optimally learning, that's what's happening. It takes a while. And they need to be calm enough. They need to feel protected enough, either from the outside by the adult or equipped enough inside themselves to say, like, I'm going to hold you all at bay because I'm really doing something, so that they can focus and be in it and be with it. So that's where the idea of done feels really good to me. Sometimes as the adult, I'm going to declare you done before you feel done. And that's tough. I'm going to take care of how tough that is with you. But my hope for you is that you get to be done. So I want you to be able to use those words. When I'm done, can I use it when you're done? Are you done? Because if they're done, then of course you can have it. Like that's the perfect time for you to be taking something from someone. When they're all done with it, right? Like that's the moment to relinquish it. When you're finished, I'm satisfied, I'm complete here.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll ask too, like, how much more time do you need? They don't really totally understand time, but like a little bit of time, kind of a medium amount of time. Like, okay, cool. We're going to give you this amount of time. We're going to set a timer. Hey Siri, set a timer for this. And then it's like letting them have the opportunity to lead up to, just kidding. To let them lead up to being done. And never mind.
No problem. I won't.
Okay, thanks.
Oh,
So
your Siri
polite.
is so
So
helpful.
polite. Yeah, give them like a lead up time to being done. Or when they were little, it's like, okay, Siri's going to have an alarm. Please don't talk to me. And we did find that was helpful, that it was some sort of winding down.
Yeah. To me, timers and turns are like useful kind of interim steps of being like, I'm going to interrupt you. Like, no, for me, the adult to know, like, I'm going to declare your time done, even whether or not you're done.
Sure.
Here's a kind of a medium step. If you can do a visual timer, I just strongly recommend it because time means nothing to them. It is still, all it means is there's more. Okay, so more, and then I'll listen for this sound. And that's okay. I think that's like an
it
okay
definitely
one.
does something to lead them to the transition because then there's less freaking out.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the like sand timer or something where they can watch that it's happening.
That's
better,
the ideal
better,
for me. If you're gonna like have if you're gonna be letting them know when it's over,
sure,
it's very helpful if they can look and sort of see how close they are there. That might be the end, even though I wrote a lot of other things down.
There's a whole other page.
Yeah. Nope.
You feel good? You got it?
Do I feel good? Is there anything else? Because I'm never speaking about this again. Just kidding.
Doubt it. Totally doubt it.
I'm going to recut way more content about this. And also, of course, send in some questions. Let's talk about it. Oh, let me look really quickly through some screenshots because I did just there were some people who said a few things that I thought were so useful. Here, I'm just going to read these out. These are just here are a handful of thoughts that I thought were cool that people posted. I work with toddlers 18 to 34 months roughly, which is like right in our zone. And one thing I like asking them is if the waiting child can play with it. Can they play with it? Sometimes the act of giving the toy to a friend is more exciting than the toy itself. Plus, it lets them come up with an answer I can then teach them how to back up. I've gotten some very big answers from tiny people, and they always impress me, even mid-meltdown. LOL.
That's cute.
I think that's great. Feel free to invite your child forward into the thing that eventually they're going to start doing. Awesome. Just know that it's not a thing they're going to be able to like close out and accomplish with consistency.
Sure.
Oh, and then she said, it's also about having their back when they say no. So many people undermine little kids just because they're small, but that's just not fair, I think. If I needed backup and the people I depended on sold me out, my feelings would be so hurt as to end the relationship. Why should our babies have to deal with that sort of non-mindfulness and especially forgive it?
Right.
Yeah. Right? If you want to build trust with your kid, then whenever reasonable, we need to be backing up the words that we're asking them to use. We ask them all the time to use their words. And if they do, and then we're like, You know, there are plenty of times when you have to say like, oh, good words, buddy. I really, really, really wish we could do that. It's not going to be able to be like that.
Sure.
But whenever it's reasonable, backing up the words they say, like holding that for them, that helps them know that their words are powerful and also that somebody's got their back when they're not yet ready to hold all those lines for themselves.
Yeah. You sometimes see that in families with multiple kids when like grandma gives 3 gifts, 1 to each kid. And then the older kid is like, actually, I want that one. I want the other kid. And like it starts when the other kid is a baby. And so then you just go, oh yeah, you can just switch these toys, no problem. But as the little one gets older and is developmentally like, wait, that's my toy. I don't want you to just take it. But mom and dad are just in the habit of switching toys. That ends up overriding the little one.
Yeah.
And they're just in the practice of it because the little one was once so little that it was, you could do that and it wasn't a thing. But then once they get even just young toddler, they start to understand like, no, but that one was given to me. I don't want to trade you.
Yep.
And yeah.
Yeah. Those are exactly the kinds of just like small patterns, just developmental patterns that start to shape the way that these relationships build, and how a child kind of expects to be treated, lets the world treat them.
Sure.
The position that they take in relationship to other people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to read this last one as sort of like a teaser for our next episode because I'll probably also read it there. So this is on the people-pleasing note. So this woman said, how this shows up in adulthood. In the gym, when someone asks me if I'm done using my weights when I'm resting between sets, I just automatically say, sure, you can use them, while my inner child screams and cries, and I passive-aggressively wait till they're done to go back to what I was doing. Same with people cutting in line at the grocery store or talking to someone. When someone else comes up to talk to them, I stop mid-conversation to let other people talk. I have difficulty telling a waiter that I'm not done with my plate when they try to take it away early. Sharing anything in a workspace environment, from printer, access to office supplies, etc. So I just thought that was like I was grateful that woman shared that because I thought that was like, yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. He's like, I'm not a person who knows how to protect my space or protect my own experience reasonably. Of course, there are people out there in the world who are on the other side of that experience, taking over everything.
Sure.
But this is particularly about the ones of us who actually are kind of like losing our footing all the time.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know how to hold it.
Yeah, there's definitely like the treat others as you want to be treated or love your neighbor as yourself. There needs to be a whole self involved. There needs to be a whole like treat you the way I want to be treated. Well, who's me? Well, I want to use the swing. Okay, well, use the swing and then treat someone else the way you want to be treated. They can do it too, but did you experience it? Did you do the thing? Otherwise, it just becomes be nothing and let everyone else be everything. And that is not healthy.
That's not what we're going for.
Yeah.
It's not even the value of sharing.
Sure.
Right? Even if you're like, no, Layne, sharing is important to us. That is not it.
Right.
Watch out
that's not
for
sharing.
that thing.
Yeah, that's not.
In the way that we're having toddlers interact with each other.
Yeah, that's good.
Because they can be powerful and it can start right here.
Great. Well done. Okay, guys, thank you so much for being here. And will the next episode be the people pleasing?
Yeah, let's do it. Why not?
Yeah, perfect.
I'm in charge.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, well, I can't wait for you to hear the next piece, and we'll see you soon. Bye.